So my name is Chemi Shuvali. I'm functional architect of AppPulse Mobile. I'm part of the R&D group. With me here today is Avi.
Hi everyone. My name is Avi Cabezon. I'm the team leader in the AppPulse Mobile R&D team.
Thanks, Avi. So just before we start, I'd like to let you know that you can post questions by clicking on the question icon. I'm sure you will have quite a few. And we will answer all the questions at the end of the sessions. Also, the slide deck will be available as a handout in the webinar. And one last thing before we start, I'd like to tell you a bit about who are we. So HP Software R&D, it's previously in 2006, until 2006, it was HP Mercury. So in total, we have more than 20 years of experience with APM software. So it's application monitoring and even system monitoring, everything together, end-to-end solutions for the enterprise business and also for the small businesses. So with this experience, we came up around 2 years ago with the new and innovative solution, which is the AppPulse Mobile. And this is what we are going to talk today. We will review what is AppPulse Mobile, and then we will discuss our approach to monitoring a mobile application. And you will see a very new, unique idea. I promise you that what you see here is not available. Many things that you see here are not available in similar products. And so we will go through measuring the UI performance of your application, and measuring application errors, some application errors that there are no indication in the code that they may happen, so it's only the user see them in the UI. And finally, you will see a very cool approach to crash analytics. You see all the tools that will help you not only to get a crash, but you also know how to reproduce them. So when we talk about, let's understand what is AppPulse Mobile. So AppPulse Mobile is a mobile application monitoring tool or analytics tool if you want. And when I talk about user experience monitoring, it's still approaching developers. So when I talk about user experience, I need to isolate crashes, and we're talking about pinpoint the client-side performance issue and the network problems and the resources that your application consumes from your users, things like battery. Everybody knows today what happens when the battery in your cellular phone is get drained. Then you find the app to blame, and we're still talking about all these problems that you as a developer, either in iOS or Android, need to solve. But our approach is to look from the user experience. We are going to, first of all, find what impact the user the most, and we focus you on these things that you really need to fix, because these are the things that your users will complain about. And once we focus you and show you what the user we show you what the user experience and what impacted most users, only then we take you into the deep dive with the tool to solve the problem. Again, if it's slow UI or a crash, etc. So this is a high-level architecture. So AppPulse Mobile is a SaaS self-service solution. You simply register to our SaaS service. You download the SDK and embed it in your mobile application. So in order to embed the SDK in the Android application, you just run a command line and we wrap your APK. And in the iOS, you link it into your project. You add a framework. But my point is that you don't need to do any code tagging and everything. Everything that you will see today is instrumented automatically. For example, all the user actions and their names and the names of the screen, we hook up to all these key methods, and we are able to automatically measure and capture all the user actions and all the network calls and everything and connect it all together. We will see this in a moment, but it's important to say that it's really 5 minutes to add it AppPulse Mobile to your mobile application, and of course with not overhead or no impact on the end user. So all this, once you add AppPulse Mobile to your mobile application, you go and test it. Later on, you deliver it to your crowd testing users or eventually to your real users. And once users are using your application, everything that impacts the user experience is being captured by Apple's mobile. All this data that we will see in this presentation is being sent to our SaaS backend. It's under the Hewlett Packard Enterprise cloud system. It's stored in the Vertica. Those of you who are familiar a little bit with the big data technology are probably heard about Vertica. It's a very strong and popular big data system or database. And eventually, what we see today is the some of the reports and the value that you can get from Apple's mobile as a user. So we'd like to start with UI performance. What is UI performance and how you can isolate it and fix problems. So we are now handing it over to Avi Cabizon, who is, to remind you, the team leader in the R&D.
Hi. Okay. So let's start with UI performance. So today we're going to show you a cool new way to measure and isolate performance problems. And let's start with the challenges with existing tools that we have. So we have the debugger, of course, which allows us to understand some of the performance problems. This is, of course, limited only for the development time and also is not thread friendly. We have logs, which also a way to measure performance, but again, it's maintenance and it's not something you can scale with. We have approaches of code tagging, where you code tag and measure times in milliseconds and put that and report that in order to understand the performance of the app. And there are, of course, application monitoring tools. Most of the application monitoring tools you will see today are focusing on network. And those that do cover user experience and UI processing tend to rely on SDKs. And what we're going to show you today is our approach to tagless monitoring of user actions and the measurement of the perceived UI performance. Okay, so we say it's all about the user actions. So the approach for AppPulse Mobile is basically to measure each action, and when we say user action, we mean any tap, swipe, launch of the application, any interaction that is being done by the end user, and we are able to automatically capture it and measure its performance and report that to our SaaS servers. So the solution, as we said, is tagless. And the way that we are doing this is by tracking the UI updates, the async operations and threads, and also the network calls that are being triggered by the user action. We provide information regarding the measurement of the user action, and we also allow to drill down and to understand what happened in the code level in your app. And all of this data, as Chemi mentioned before, is data that is being sent from production. So you are able with this tool to to get a code level view, code level visibility into your production mobile application. Okay, so the way that we do that, I'm going to drill down a bit to clarify how we measure the UI response time for a user action, just to make it clear, because everyone here are technical, so I want to elaborate so you will understand the technique. Okay, so all of the UI updates that are related to the user action, we track these automatically. And the time between the action started, when the user tapped the action, and the last UI update is the measured UI performance. Okay, now to calculate the last UI update, we basically need to track down what is going on in the app. So we do that by tracking all of the async operations that are being triggered by the action and results with UI updates. We also have some means to filter out UI updates that are repetitive, like banners or ads, to make sure we get an accurate measurements. In the screenshot you see here below, you see some examples of the measurements results. So you see that we sort the user actions by the users that are affected by slow performance, and all of this this is the screen name and the action name. We get this automatically. There are also ways for you to give an alias by yourself to change that, and also an option to change it in an SDK. And you get also the response time. So that's the average response time for a specific user action. And in the drill, once you drill to the next step, you basically get a view that shows you what happened in the code. Okay, so this view, let's go over each element in this view. So we have the first line, which indicates what happens in the main thread. So we see, for example, that there is an action always starts with some kind of a listener. So in this example, it's on click. It could be any handler that you've configured for an action. And the line of the main thread shows all of the code, all of the methods that were executed on the main thread. We see here, for example, that we also capture activity, a life cycle events. For example, this is an onCreate event, onCreate view by a fragment. So we capture that. We also capture all of the activity lifecycle events, and since these lifecycle events have been triggered by the onClick event, even if not directly, even if indirectly through async processes, we do capture that and give you a holistic view that shows you the UI updates that were triggered from the onClick. You also see in the lines below, you see the threads, the worker threads, and we have here indication of HTTP, of network in blue, in light blue, and we also have indication of method, which is orange. So we get all of this information to you in one view. Let's look at some more examples so you'll get the picture. So we see here an example of an action that starts with, of course, with a listener on the main thread, and then it started an async task that executed an HTTP request. But at the end, there was no update to the UI. So if we take the most basic async pattern in Android, which is a async task, let's say you didn't implement anything in the on post execute. So that's your example. So in this case, the the measurement of the UI from the perspective of the user is not the entire time it took to run the async method and the HTTP request. It's just the UI updates. So we are able to give you a view, so will be able to understand that. So in this example, we see that from the user perspective, the UI responded fast. Okay, there was no update to the UI. So this is exactly the difference. This is the essence of the difference between us and the other monitoring tools, which look more systematically and give you information about the network. So you could basically be looking at the wrong stuff. You could be looking at something that takes a network code that takes a huge amount of time, but it's not affecting the UI. So maybe you shouldn't solve that. At least not solve that first. So this is a nice aspect to look at. Now a second example. So this is an example where there again there is it starts with on click, and there is an async process and HTTP request, and it leads to an update. So in here probably on post execute or some kind of other delegate to update the UI was implemented. So let's go to the next example. This is an example of how this is actually an example of a good way to parallel network calls. So we see here an action, and this is like a search action, okay, where you have you need to fetch a lot of resources from the network. Okay, so what we see here in the implementation is basically we see async async methods running, and they are running in parallel, and they are mostly aligned. And we see that we see that really visually with this tool. This is a bad example. What you see here, you see here something which visually looks like stairs. Okay, so I wouldn't I will not say which app this is it, but this is an example of implementation, a bad implementation of parallel network calls. Okay, so you are able to view that with our view. So this is an example, but you can take this to anything that you do. Not only network. If you're doing a SQLite processing, if you're doing JSON parsing, anything that could be time consuming on the client, animations, you will see all of that in this tool. We will now see a nicer implementation. Sorry, this is even worse. So this is a nicer implementation of that that uses only one async task and avoids the overhead of creating multiple async tasks that really don't work well in parallel. So basically, this is we've shown you an example. You can take that to your own domain, your own implementation, and really get a nice value out of this. So basically, all you need to do is, like Chemi said, you instrument the app. It works for both Android and iOS, and you get you would get the data into AppPulse Mobile. Okay. Next topic for us would be the error analytics. Okay, so so a lot have been said about error analytics, crash analytics. I think we have what we're showing you today is again an approach from a UX perspective rather than a systematic monitoring way to do that. So we are talking about what you see here in the screenshots. You see multiple notifications of messages. You've probably seen this a lot in either the mobile app you're developing or any mobile app that you're using. and these could have a huge impact on the mobile user experience. Um, so traditional application monitoring tools, when they talk about errors, they usually talk about HTTP errors or errors that you write out in some SDK call. But none really gives the center stage to these messages, these UI notifications. Um, so basically, you could be monitoring with a traditional APM solution, and you can think, oh, everything is going well with the app, where the users that are actually using that are experiencing a lot of these notifications, and these could impact the user experience and the way people view your app. Um, so let's drill down a bit to understand what we are talking about. So we have a message, okay, a pop-up message that is showing. So I started by saying that this is an error, but it's not an error for sure, okay? There are, and you can see this in these two examples here, there are times where you need to either pop up a question to the user, you need to notify him about something, and it's not necessarily an error, okay? So the challenge that we are facing in the solution here is to identify, not only identify that the message box was raised, but also be able to indicate if it's an error or not. So we cannot rely on any tags or keywords to do that. Again, icons is not something we can guarantee, and so everything that we could work with is text. So our approach for this solution was with text analysis. So in here you see an example of how you would see that in AppPulse Mobile. So basically, our approach is to do a text analysis, which is based on a machine learning algorithm, um, um, and uh, and we are able to classify each message as an error or not an error. So and also we provide an interface in the AppPulse Mobile UI to enable you to provide your own feedback and improve the results. So you can say if something is not an error, then you can tag it as not an error. So you are able to also give your feedback and improve that and align that to your needs. So basically, this one, the point here is this is your way of getting notifications, error reports about notifications that your user experience. Even if this notification is about a validation error, that behind that there is no HTTP request or any that failed or anything else like that. So it's just a message. So you're able to get that with AppPulse Mobile. And also with a more complex use case, but is also possible in case you have an action that has multiple errors related to it. For example, HTTP request. Let's say you have an action, you needed to access the network, you got a 5x6 some kind of a bad response from the server, and you pop up a notification to the user. Then you will get all of this data together and in AppPulse Mobile. We're able to group that around the action, around the user action. Like we said before, like we talk about performance in the context of user action, also in here, in the error analytics, everything that you see is grouped around the user action. So basically, you could see UI errors, HTTP errors, and the SDK errors all together in case they really are grouped around the same action. Okay, regarding SDK errors, so there are always cases where Chemi will talk in a minute about crash analytics. So crash analytics is about unhandled exceptions. AppPulse Mobile captures that automatically, and you don't need to add a line of code in order to get that functionality. But there are cases where you have a handled exception. You still would like to report that because that's something which is abnormal to you, and you would like, as a developer, to be able to see how many people get that, and in what scenario they get that, and what is the stack trace, and all of the data that you would get from a crash reporting tool or error reporting tool. So the way that you do that is using a simple API. We see here examples of the API. You have an optional description that you can attach to that. And it's automatically linked to the user actions, as we talked before. So again, you would see you added a line of code to report the exception, and it's automatically correlated in the UI to the user action, so you are able to easily get to it. Okay, so the next topic is crash analysis by Chemi.
Thank you, Avi. Okay, sorry, a second. So just want to mention that even though most of our examples are on Android, just let me clarify that most of the things that you see here today are also available for iOS application, of course. So let's talk a bit about crash analytics. So if you're a mobile app developer, I'm sure you're familiar with the crash analysis. There are many tools, some of them are even free, that are doing crash analytics. So what is so unique in AppPulse Mobile? So you remember we were talking about a user experience approach. So the user experience approach comes here. The user experience approach and our capability to automatically capture the user action comes here in the way that we link each crash to the user action, okay? And we group all the crashes according to the user action. So we don't report you a null pointer exception in this line happened 10,000 times. What we report is that in this example, we report to you that highest number of users, in this case 260, experienced crash when they hit the scan button in the check deposit screen. So this way, you or your manager or your product manager, app owner, everybody can understand what happened and can prioritize the crash that he wants to fix. Now, yeah, you may argue that for a specific action, there could be different type of crashes. In practice, in most of the cases, the crashes of the same user action are most of the cases are the same. And even if it's a crash that happens in several user action, it still be available here as the top in the top action that crashed the most. So we see it in real life example for a customer that this approach is very much loved by our customers. Okay, so now once I focus you on the user action that crashed and you understand what happened, you probably get the task to fix it. So if you drill into this user action, you can see the sample of the crashes. So this is an example of a sample of the crash. You see the user action, but beside the user action, what you see here is pretty obvious. I mean, you have the crash log and the device state, and most of these things come with almost every tool. However, if you can see this one, it's the crash trail. So the crash trail, once I click on the crash trail for this crash, what I can see here is the flow of all the actions that the user did that led to the crash. So you get the list of automatically you get the list of all the user actions that preceded the crash. You know exactly how to reproduce the crash. If you remember before, we've seen we have the device state, so we know what is the device, what is the operating system, um, which connection was it, how much memory was free. Maybe it's a memory problem. We see the crash the crash log, and together with the automatic crash trail, we have a full picture that helps us to be able to get all the means that we need in order to have a very good chance to reproduce the crash. Once you reproduce the crash, it's usually it's easier to fix. The most of the problems when you have a bug is to reproduce it usually. And but sometimes it's not enough to know what were the actions that preceded to the crash. Sometimes you need to know about a specific logic that happened in the code, to which server it was connected, what was the state of a specific flag or something like that. In order to pinpoint to get information about things specific into your code level, then you have of course the breadcrumbs. So like Avi showed you API about errors, we also have API that enables you to log breadcrumbs in strategic places in the code that you think that will help you solve the crashes that may happen or anything else. So in this way, you get the full picture. You get the, we know what is the user action that crashed. Okay, so you know to prioritize it. Okay, so you identify the crash and you know where it happened and is it important. Next, you get the type of the error and the crash log, the device state, and finally the crash trail, the user actions, right? And finally your breadcrumbs that you hopefully already logged inside that will help you to fix this flow. So this way you have a full picture of anything that you can get in order to reproduce the crash and eventually fix it. Now, sorry. So this slide shows you the API in order to log the breadcrumbs that I just showed you. Everything, of course, is documented in our SDK, in the papers that comes with the SDK. Now, again, all the functionality you get it out of the box, but you have the power to use the API to add more information. And of course, the breadcrumbs are linked to the context of the crash trail of the user action. Finally, if you are the one that saw this information in the AppPulse UI, you may want to, depending on your role, you may want to log a defect. So we have all the information. We know how to reproduce, what is the environment, what happened, where did it happen. In one click, you see here the button, submit a defect. So in one click, you can submit a defect with all the information about the crash log and how to reproduce and what was the environment. Currently, we are integrated into Jira and HPE Agile Manager, which is also a SaaS solution to manage agile project and defect management. And this is how you can actually see the end-to-end. We focus you on what is the crash that you need to fix, and we also give you the means to fix it. Okay, I think that's about it from my side. We had some questions in the
yeah. Hemi, let me start with some of these questions. We just had a couple of them along the way, and some of them were answered in a written form, but let's just open them up to the group. One of the questions was, since you're gathering a lot of information, how is this going to affect in terms of data consuming as well as battery? Do you have an estimate?
Yeah, I can take this. This is Avi. So we have a white paper that's detailing all of the way we operate in terms of resource utilization on the device. There is no overhead. We keep a rate for the network that we do to report to our SaaS servers. So we have a rate for that network, and we also do not operate when the app is in the background, not to drain out the battery. So all of that is, we have that in white paper, and we'll try to get that white paper also as an handout if it's possible, so you can read that.
And I'd like to add to that, you can test us. I mean, once you instrument your application with AppPulse Mobile, one of the things that AppPulse Mobile is measuring is how much data each service provider, each third party is consuming. So you can just go out and try it, and you will see what is the percentage that is from your application that is consumed by each service. And it includes, of course, also our SaaS service. So you can, it's out there. It's nothing that we, yeah.
Great. So thank you, Hemi and Avi. There's another question. You know, we're gathering again a lot of information in production. How are we dealing with the user privacy policy?
Okay, I can take that. So I mean, these two questions indeed are the first questions that always stands out, and I think we are one of the most the product that care about the privacy of your users the most, essentially because our customers are enterprise and our bank. I mean, I think that banks are our top customers. So what we do, so first of all, the data that we keep, it's not user specific. The data is aggregated. So all the statistics that you've seen are not specific to user X or user Y. So these are aggregated statistics. Now, if we talk about the UI that we measure, for example, the button, the label on the button. If you have a button that contains credit card number, we will not report this number because we have some mechanism that filter out, using regular expression, filter out these patterns, these private numbers or private strings. So we come with out-of-the-box configuration for the most common things, but you can also configure your own, and you can add on top of that more patterns that you want to filter out. So this applies not only to the UI, but also to the URLs. So if we measure the network, then the parameters is not something that we report, and again, you can configure and filter out any private pattern that's relevant to your application, and if it wasn't covered by us, and same here, the technical white paper answer this question as well.
Okay, there's a question that we get quite often from developers that goes along the lines of that, you know, there are a lot of developers that are monitoring using Crashalytics, and many developers just want to know, how are you differentiated from an offering like Crashalytics?
Sure, yeah, it's a great question. So Crashalytics is a free tool, and it's a good tool for developers to gather information about crashes, and it does it well. However, first of all, AppPulse Mobile does a lot more. AppPulse Mobile, we didn't see a demo for the full product. We just focused on the isolation stuff. But AppPulse Mobile it first of all measured all aspects of end user experience. So it's a lot beyond crashes. So we're talking about total user experience. We're talking about Avi showed you the UI performance. So we measure the response time as the user perceived it in the UI. We capture all the user action. we capture errors, network, HTTP network, we capture errors in the UI, we capture resource utilization like data consumption and battery. We basically monitor everything that impacts the user experience. We give you a unified score for your application quality. We call it the Fundex. And we also focus you on what you need to fix the most. If you will search for our product, you will see what I'm talking about. So one thing is, and we also have the user flow. So it's also it does also the mobile analytics. And so all these things, the mobile, like the more user analytics, but also all the measures, the technical measures, it's also brought to the product to your managers and maybe R&D manager or your PM in a way that they can also understand it. You do not need to be a technical guru. So this is one thing. It's just that Crashlytics is good, but we do a lot more. The second point is that what I showed you with the crash analysis, that we group the crashes according to the user action. So this is something that you will not get by the free tool. We capture the user action, we group the action according to the user action, and when we drill down, you see also the flow of the user action, the crash trail. So these are the aspects where we simply do more than the free tool, much more. And also we
Mobility
are
teams.
part.
Sure.
Yeah, and one more point. So as I mentioned, we are part of the HP software where we develop APM products. So when we talk about APM, it's good that you can identify what is the slowest action and what is the slowest URL that caused the action to be slow. But eventually, you are part of a team that also has a need to isolate the backend sometimes. So AppPulse Mobile is part of the Apple suite, and we have so Crashlytics is focused on the crashes for the mobile, but we are part of a suite, so you can expand yourself and monitor also the backend or do synthetic monitoring. So you can do much more with the Apple's. Okay.
Okay, very good. So there are a lot of mobility teams that may ask, why can't I just get some of this information from Google Analytics? What would you respond to that?
Okay, so Google Analytics is a more of complementary tool. Google Analytics is focusing on the user analytics, so it focuses on tell you what your users are doing, where do they come from. Yes, it does a little bit of crash analysis and things like that, which requires you to use their SDK, but the focus is the user analytics. Our focus is first of all to measure the user experience, to know where the problems are, and give you the end-to-end isolation. And we have some, now even in our part, as I mentioned, we also have some analytics. For example, we have the user flows, okay, which is Google Analytics also have the user flows. So the difference here, for example, is that we capture and we do the user flows, the user funnel or the user journey, however you want to call it. We do it automatically. So first of all, we do it automatically. It means that we capture all the screens and the actions and their flow between them automatically, no code change. You can try us out. Just 10 minutes after the meeting, you can just see your flows. And the second thing is that on top of the flows, we also put the layer of the measurements, the performance, and the crashes. So it's not only that you see what are the flows and where your users are exiting your application, you can also see if it happened due to crashes or performance issue. So you application and the user behavior.
Part question. And in terms of being able to use AppPulse Mobile with your mobile app, does this increase the size of the of the mobile app? Is that going to cause any overhead there? But the other side of this is in terms of time. There are a lot of offerings that maybe you have to code and tag. How much time savings can you save from this codeless and tagless way of monitoring, instrumenting?
Yes. Okay. So first, regarding the overhead, so the overhead for Android is somewhere between 200 and 400 kilobytes, and for iOS it's between 500 and 700 kilobytes. You have all of this information in the a white paper document that we've attached as a handout. Secondly, regarding the amount of time you can save, so with SDK-based solutions, which do not have user action being detected automatically, you basically have to chase your code. And in order to have a good APM solution, you have to chase the code. You have to put a dedicated developer on your team that is always working on this, that is always working on making sure that the APM tool gives you what you need. And this is not the way it should be. The way it should be is that the APM tool should work for you. So we have that in AppPulse Mobile. You get all of the user actions automatically, whether it's for user experience monitoring or for user analytics. And you also have the power of the SDK if you want to enrich the data. But this is, again, also in cases where you need to log something which is really internal to the app, and not something which is generic as the user action.
And thank you very much, both of you. If you want to learn more about AppPulse Mobile, you can go to hpe.com/go/AppPulse Mobile. And Hemi and Avi, thank you very much. Would you like to share your emails in case somebody wants to contact? It's there on the screen, so you can go to chaim.shuvali@hpe.com or avi.cabazon@hpe.com, and if you have any questions following up from this, they would be glad to answer those for you. But thank you all very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Avi.
Thank you.